Turning now to Puerto Rico and what's at stake there for students, parents, and teachers. I'm joined via Skype from San Juan by Danica Cotto of the Associated Press. So, first of all, why the closures?
Well, the Department of Education has said that in the past 3 decades, Puerto Rico has seen school enrollment drop by 42%. And since May of last year, that enrollment has dropped by 38,700 students. Most of it is due to the economic crisis. But in addition, there's been roughly 135,000 people who have left after Hurricane Maria. So most of it is due to that drop, in addition to them wanting to consolidate schools and save some money.
So what happens to the teachers? What happens to the buildings?
Sure. Well, there's about 4,700 teachers who will be affected. The Secretary of Education has promised that no one will lose their job. So the plan is to redistribute them to other schools, and those who need more training will receive more training. And then one of the biggest complaints is exactly that: what will happen to the schools? Puerto Rico from 2010 to 2015 has closed about 150 schools. And then last year they closed another 179 schools. And now there's about 283 schools that they're closing, and most of them have become a blight across the island. Some have been turned into community centers. The governor today will make another announcement about how some of these schools will be refurbished, but overall, people are complaining that they become an eyesore.
The refurbishment would cost money, and money that the government right now doesn't seem to have a lot of extra.
Correct. Some of these are being done, some of these refurbishings are being done with help from municipalities, with help from the private sector. But again, by and large, most of these schools have been abandoned and they
Mhm.
remain abandoned.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the student composition as well. And one of the facts that jumped out from one of the stories you'd written recently was a special needs population that's higher in Puerto Rico than in America, in the mainland, I should say.
Correct. Puerto Rico has about 30% of its students, which is roughly 319,000 public school students. 30% of them have special needs, which is about twice the average of the U.S. mainland. And so the concerns with many of these parents who are affected by the school closures is, who will teach their kids? How will their education be disrupted? And in addition, what, kind of resources will be allocated to these new schools?
Now, let's also put this in the context of this larger conversation that's happening on Puerto Rico about privatization. How do charter schools play into this?
Well, the governor recently signed a bill that would establish charter school programs in 10% of Puerto Rico schools, which so far stand about 1,110 schools. And in addition to that, he'll provide private school vouchers to about 3% of the student population. That too has been opposed by unions here, teachers here, largely because they say they worry that this will fall into private hands, that public funds should be used, directly for the students and not placed in private hands. They worry about corruption, they worry about mismanagement, and overall they feel it might go down the same road that Puerto Rico's government did, several decades ago.
Is there an equal distribution of how these schools are being closed down? Is it different out in the rural area versus the city centers?
Yes, there's a difference. Most of them are in rural areas. The closures have occurred or will occur across the island. Most of them are in rural areas. Salinas, for example, will see 9 of its 12 schools close, and that's located along the southern coast of the island. In addition, Patillas will see about half of its school closed, and that's in the southeast coastal part of the island. And then along the north coast, there are several other municipalities who will see 44 to 46% of its schools closed. And again, the concern with parents is if you don't have a car, or how will these students get to their new schools if there's no transportation, or if it's going to take longer. Parents just feel there's just going to be a lot of interruption to their lives.
All right, Danica Cotto of the Associated Press joining us via Skype tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.